Hey guys, and welcome to how to paint an Abhorrant Archregent with yellow. So I don't know how this is going to go, but if you're watching this, then I guess I've figured out how to do it. You would have seen a paint list show up just before this, so obviously I've worked it out. Otherwise I'm just speaking to myself. So yeah, what we're going to be doing is concentrating on the problem of yellow and how to paint it using this Flesh Eater Quartz Archregent here as an example. So I've had in my mind for a while for this Flesh Eater Quartz army that I'm doing that I really wanted to have a yellow king. So back when I first decided to start these guys and I was getting into AOS, I found out that these are basically like Bretonnians, and it made me laugh so hard that I just had to do this. And so I want the yellow king leading my Bretonnians into battle, because it just makes me laugh so hard every time I think about that. And yeah, it's a bit of a dig on Bretonnians, but anyway, so you know, I want to do yellow, but there's obviously a few problems with that. It's a difficult color, and you know, it requires a little bit of testing and a little bit of like working out. So what we're going to go for is kind of like a mustard yellow, and I think that's a good way to do for skin rather than like a really bright yellow. It'll be a bit more forgiving. And the idea I've got in my head is that, you know, that character from Sin City, the yellow character, I've forgotten his name now, but you know, I've got that in my head, this really bright yellow. So when you see the whole army, you'll see this yellow character around, you know, near where the throne is, and you'll have all these like pale, you know, ghouls running along, and he'll really stand out. So that's what I'm kind of going for. And then we're going to have some purple to make it extra hard on myself. We're going to be using purple as well, you know, to fade into the hands and so on. And so that's where we're going to try to incorporate yellow and purple together, which normally sort of cancels each other out. They're basically complementary colors, and they don't really go well together when you layer them over the top of one another. If you don't know that, complementary colors cancel each other out. If you layer them, they go gray. So but the beautiful thing about miniature paints is that, so these will be the ones I'm using, so we're using Bella Brown for the skin, and then this Alien Purple, is that miniature paints aren't pure colors. They have a lot of other pigments in them, and so they don't always cancel each other out. The exception to that is usually like red and green. They're really strong pigments and they tend to always go grey, but other complementary color combinations don't always do that, and so you want to do a test. So I've done a little test here, just a really loose, rough one, but you can see that the purple does in fact go over the yellow and does work. So that's the kind of thing, that's just very rough and loose, but that's the sort of thing we're going for. You know, thinking about that character from Sin City, I think it'll be really cool and you know, make me laugh every time I use this guy. So yeah, the first thing to do here is I've undercoat it with the Chaos Black Citadel undercoat spray, and then I've given it a Zenithal top-down spray of Gracia from Citadel as well, and then I've come back in with the black and re-blackened out all the areas that are going to be other colors, you know, and set up a lot of that. Preparation is key when you're doing yellow. So you know, obviously a lighter base is going to be good, but you'll see even here where we've got black shadows on the skin, that's probably going to go green. So we're going to have to counter that. So I've got some Rhinox hide here, which has a lot of red in it. And like I said before, red and green, that will actually neutralize a bit of that green if we don't want it, but it could be a really nice contrast as well, so it might stay in. So that's the kind of thing we're going for. So I've set this up. The first step here is to paint the base, because we want to see how that's going to contrast with the yellow as well, so that we can get a good idea about where it's going, and it'll allow our eye to really focus on the detail. And also because we're not going to really be able to dry brush this later when we've got these feet and everything around it, it's a bit difficult. So we want to get that base done, get all these bones done as well down there, and just really set it up so we can just focus on the figure, and that should set us up for success, I guess. So yeah, let's get started. Okay, so to begin with, we're going to base the tombstone that the character's standing on, and you know, the skulls, or around the skulls anyway, all the mud and dirt that's around it, in the necromancer cloak, dark grey. So you'll see me just wet brushing that on. You don't have to be super careful with it, you just get it everywhere if you're going to do a grey base. And then I'm just working up, once I've done that, into the lighter grey, a little bit lighter grey for the actual tombstone. And then once that's done, we move into the dry brushing, as you'll see me do here, and just building up through the greys into lighter grey and mix with a bit of white to get a nice you know, sort of ashen kind of base look. Not really worrying about the skulls just yet. So once that's done, and you'll see me just go through and do that, and we've got a bit of tonal range there, then we move on to base coating the skulls. And so the skulls, I'm using that field drab from Vallejo and just basing that in that brown color, as you'll see me do, and then just building up through that brown mixed with a Shabti all the way up, mixed with white for the highlights, as you'll see me do in a second. Just building up the tones in the skulls, picking out the raised areas, you know, as you do, just simple layering and highlighting, and just getting those skulls down and getting that nice sort of like old bone look. And then once those two elements are complete, then we need to get some depth into it. So basically just using the sepia wash, the green wash, and some Agric Earthshade, and just building in some tones, you know, washing it down into the cracks and grooves on that tombstone thing there, and like into the ground, a little bit around the edges of the skulls to sink them into the ground, and that way we get a nice, you know, vibrant finish on that base. So, you know, we have something to play off against when we paint the figure. And basically we're done. Okay, so now that we've got the base done, as you can see, it's going to help us to really see the figure and work out how we're going to proceed with that skin. So we have something to work against, and I've even gone to the extent of blacking out the rim as well. We can go back and fix that later if it gets scuffed or anything, but it just helps us really visualize what's really happening on this skin and how it's going to be affected by the base, because there's a lot of interaction that's going to go on. Yellow is a tough color. So one thing I will point out here is if you are going to do a yellow skinned monster, probably don't put a lot of yellow on the base like I've done. With those cream colors on the bones. Probably use a dark color. That would be much better to contrast against the yellow. But when I made this figure, I wasn't thinking about the skin tone. I was just doing the base up and thinking it was cool. So just a little side note there, but you know, we'll make it work. So we probably will come back to the base and add some of my usual glazes with the purple, blue, and you know, magenta tones and so on, just to help tie it with the figure, because that'll probably end up happening on the figure as well. So we're going to look at that. But the first step is to base this skin tone, and so the Bella Brown is going to be a bit of a tough ask to get onto this skin in a couple of coats. So what we're going to use is the Vallejo here, because it actually covers a lot better than the Citadel color does. So we're going to use this as the base, like we did for the bones, and then from that we can build in the Bella Brown and build up into that mustard yellow, and then highlight with some of this the elfic flesh here from Game Color, which is also Vallejo. So that should be our progression, and then if we want to put the Rhinox hide in for shadows and so on, we can do that down the track, and maybe some glazes and all that sort of thing, and set ourselves up for when we start adding in the purple, which is going to be a daunting process. But you know, the initial stage of this yellow should actually be pretty good, because we're building from a brown base, and it will make it a little bit easier. So I guess we should get started, eh? Okay, so to begin with, we need to base coat that skin, and you'll see me putting down the field drab brown there, just to give a nice good coverage for the subsequent base shading layer to go on, which is going to be a mix of a little bit of that field drab into Bella Brown, and that'll become the base layer, which you'll see me doing now, and that will give us a nice shade layer. So you might leave a little bit of the darker field drab in some places, but we're putting on that mix level, and then from there you'll see me then come through and do a double coat of like a really thin down version of the Bella Brown to build up slowly. Not quite a glaze, but like a relatively thin coat, 2 coats, to really build a nice strong yellow for that Bella Brown, leaving the shadows and, you know, the little areas in the skin for the darker shade underneath. So we get a good modulation over the surface of the anatomy. And then from there we need to build in the darker parts around the feet and the hands, and you'll see me using the Rhinox hide here in successive layers, very slowly built up, as this will be a better transition for any purples we want to add. And so then once you've got that down, as you'll see me doing here, you then come back in and glaze Bella Brown mixed with water into the transition areas between the Rhinox and the Bella Brown, so that we get a nice smooth blend. And so that's going to allow us then to come back through now, as you'll see me doing, and then highlight the skin, so building up through Bala Brown and that elfic flesh that we've got, and starting to build those tones and getting that nice muscle sinew kind of look that we've got going on over the surface, but focusing mostly around the face and the tops of all the muscle groups and not worrying about the undersides too much. And so then once we've got all that down, we've got to come back through and highlight that Rhinox. And so using the same elfic flesh, mixing with the Rhinox to get a nice universal highlight, building up those edges on all those small sections across the feet and the hands, but again paying most attention to the top, so that the hand that's near the face to give us that focal point, and really just get some impact there. So that's the main areas, the hands on top, which is where you're going to be looking. The feet you're not going to look as much at. So then once that's done, we can get that purple in now. So the wing membranes and around the ears and so on in the face, we're going to be building in some of that Grimnar purple and my favorite color, Corpse Pale, and building up those tones, getting those highlights in, just really working that purple in through all those little membrane areas, and again focusing mostly on the upsides of all of that, not the undersides as much, and obviously working in around the face as well, which you'll see me in a second. I'll then be touching up that, so we get purple all around, so around the ears and so on, and finally building in some of those tones in the teeth and so on. You'll see me just highlighting it up with some Ushabti bone. And so then once we've sort of got everything to this level, then it's coming back in, as you'll see me do here, and highlighting all the black areas, so the claws and the little spikes and so on the spine, all that kind of stuff. And so I'm using Ushabti here mixed in with the black to get a nice warm set of greys to highlight up with, and again focusing on the claws, that the hands and so on, and around the head area there, to really make all that pop, and then letting everything else fade away. And so we should end up with something really cool. Alright, so let's take a look. So here's the results so far. I think it's really come together. So we've managed to rein this in, which is pretty cool. So the change to Rhinox hide for the ends of the hands and the feet, I think, was a good choice, as opposed to the alien purple that I was going to use, and rather using the Grimnar purple on those wings to add the purple in there. And because the Rhinox hide has actually a lot of purple in it, you get this kind of maroon color as you highlight up. It's adding a little touch of purple into those highlights. So overall it's working very well, and so that's going to really set us up now to do all the little fine details and so on. The shoulder pad there for the metals, we'll do some worn like copper and gold on the hilt of that sword and so on. And we're going to do some scarlet red with purple shadows for the loincloth there. We want this guy to be a bit of a, he's an old Bretonnian king. He's got to have his kingly robes. So I'm going to try to do maybe even a little bit of freehand on there. We'll wait and see how we go. But I'm basically going to finish off all those little small details, the skulls and so on. So I've got our list of colors here. We're going to be using those Mephiston red there with some of the orange, and I've got some blue for the shadows. We've got our color glazes here, the purple and magenta and so on. We've got our Rune Lord brass and some silver, some gold and so on, some metal color there, plus the Ushabti and so on for little bone areas, and basically just finish off all these smaller details. And so you will get that nice spot color of the scarlet with the purple shadows. It will tie it all in together, and we can then take a good last look at it. And we might need to add in some more color glazes somewhere, but looking at it at the moment, it's pretty much there. And unfortunately with this footage, it's a little bit washed out, but it is actually a lot deeper in color and so on than what you're actually seeing in the video footage. So if you do try something like this, you will get a nice deep color. And the part I didn't mention on just before was that the Rhinox hide, when I've been glazing on those hands and those feet, I've also glazed in certain small areas around the body where we get some really deep shadows, in little creases, like in around the thigh there, and where the belly meets the robes there. So you can do that as well, just to glaze in some extra shadow in the mouth and so on, as I was detailing the face, just to add a bit of that extra pop in certain spots so that it's not all the one sort of shadow. And that's really what you're trying to do, is vary up the degree of shading and highlighting across the body and keep most of the highest contrast and the highest lights towards the top of the figure, where the focal point is. And you should end up with something really cool. So anyway, I won't waffle on any longer. Let's get into this last stage of this model and see about finishing it, eh? Okay, so to begin with, we're doing the brass, and so with that we're going to be mixing down, you'll see me do it, adding a little bit of black in there, and then doing like a darker brass tone for the undertone of the little shoulder pad that he's wearing. And so then the idea there is to then put that down and then wet brush over the top just the straight brass color, so you get a bit of tonal definition there and a bit of highlight on there, so a bit of a range basically, and that'll prepare us for the later stages. And then from there we go through and we paint all the metal areas, all the little chains and so on. And then you've got the gold as well, so painting I'm using gold on the sword, the hilt there. And then once all of that is kind of sorted out, then I'm going through and doing my sepia tone wash mixed with a bit of water, and we're going to be laying that down on all those metallic areas, so the shoulder pad and so on, and the end of the sword, the gold, all that kind of stuff. And then once that's kind of down, and you'll see me do it in a second, we then want to move into the black wash, and again mixing water with it, not having it too concentrated, obviously after the sepia tone is dry, and then putting that black wash on, and that's going to give you a nice deep luster to all of those metals. And then just before we do our color glazing, we're going to be doing a little bit of dry brushing over with a nice small dry brush with a bit of silver over the shoulder pad, just to bring it out a bit and make it stand out. And then also once that kind of is done, again preparing us for the color glazing, we then move into highlighting the end of that sword. So I've used a bit of silver there, just picking out those edges that you'll see me do, just to make it stand out a little bit, and obviously then highlighting the gold as well. So I've just mixed the silver in with the gold and just picking out some little spots, again giving us a nice modulated surface so that we can then do that glazing, which you're seeing me do now, just building in magenta tones. We're going to be going through and adding a lot of water to that, and then obviously the purple as well, being very directed, putting it into all the little cracks and grooves, and then also finally the blue, and the blue is very carefully placed, and you're doing that over pretty much all of the metallics in varying degrees. The main ones obviously are the magenta, and the purple is going to give you the biggest definition, and then finally coming back, as you'll see me do in a second, with that silver, just a little lineage highlight just on the ends of the shoulder pad there, just to really make it pop and make it really stand out, because that's what we want. And then we're doing the leathers, and with the leathers it's that doom bull again mixed with black. You'll see me do it many times in my tutorials, and I build up through Bella Brown mixed in. You'll see me doing little edge highlights and little flicks and so on, and just building all of that up to give the leathers a bit of interest and a bit of variety there. And you'll just see me come through and do that, and then once that's kind of all there, you'll be ready then to crack into that red. And so on the robes that he's wearing, or what I think of as his kingly robes, right? So I'm using a Mephiston red mixed with a little bit of blue to make it nice and deep, and just building up that luster. And we're going to go through and build up through that Mephiston red again, and then eventually adding orange for the highlight, so you get a nice deep dark, really nice, rich kind of red with a lot of blue in the shadows, which will go to purple. So that should also complement the other colors that we've got on the model, and so that really all ties it together and gives us a spot color so that your eye is drawn to that, and it just adds a bit of variety overall. And so just building that up through, you'll see me come through and do that, and then finally at the very end, once that whole process is done, we've still got a few skulls on there and some bones around the neck, and so just coming in and picking out the bones, just doing the same process that I did on the earlier stages with the base, just picking that out with a shabti, and the little bit of rope that's around the neck to really give the model a great look. And that should really be it, I think. It should be really cool. And there we are, one finished Ghoul King, my yellow king, Bretonnian Lord, all done. Yeah, it's come up pretty cool. I think we managed to get that yellow together, and I think the change with the Rhinox hide as on those you know, the feet and the hands and everything was a good choice, because it still had a lot of purple in it, and when you build up those highlights, you're getting a bit of that purple in there, and then moving into the Grimnar. I think yeah, overall that was a definitely good choice over the alien purple, and then we get a little bit of that nice deep red in the cloth. Yeah, still unsure about what I want to do a little freehand on here, but I won't do it for this video, maybe for another one another time. But anyway, yeah, I think this came out really cool. I'm really happy where it's at. It doesn't really need any more glazing or any more colors. I think there's enough variety in there. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this. Please hit that like button, subscribe button if you have. And at the end of this, there'll be an overview with like a nicer image of the model and the paint list again, so that you can have a look at that if you're interested in doing a yellow monster. But otherwise, I guess I'll catch you on the next one.